Hello, fellow Whovians. How you doing out there today? As you know, we had a new episode of Doctor Who, April 15th, which was yesterday. Anyways, and I'm just gonna kind of go over my thoughts on it. The final season with Capaldi, the new companion, and and a few other things. Um, what looks like Stephen Moffat's story arc for the season, or at least part of it. So, anyways, the episode, the series premiere, I'm sorry, the season premiere was called The Pilot, and it starts out with the new companion, who's the character's name is Bill Potts, coming into an office, like a professor's office at a university and whatnot, and you see the TARDIS over in the corner, and everything, and she's a bit nosy and looking around and stuff, and you see the pictures on the desk. You see there's a picture of River Song there, and you see the another picture there, which I'm pretty certain at this point was Susan. And I think that was done that way because those are two people that the doctor is very, very responsible for, I would say, in my opinion. And so their two pictures end up there. So that brings us to the new guy, the new companion, the bald guy. Yeah, he's interesting. I'm still wondering a bit about him, who he is or where he comes from. But I don't know. He is kind of funny. He's kind of there as a bit of comic relief. It almost seems, like in this episode when he was explaining to her the interdimensional technology of being able to fit a bigger box into a smaller box. And he says, like the joke he made was, first you have to envision putting a bigger box into a smaller box. And she's like, okay. He goes, then you have to do it. He goes, that's the bit that people usually have trouble with. So, yeah, he's kind of funny. But the thing that I was wondering about is at the beginning of the episode, is he maybe a robot, or was that just play acting because the doctor wanted her to think that maybe he had built that guy and that guy was a robot, and that's why he just hung around all the time and seemed creepy. Or I don't know. I mean, I'm assuming that, but I assume that guy just hangs around a lot, and people might ask questions about him. And so if people thought he was a robot that the doctor built, it might explain why he's around. But so I'm not sure. Is this guy a robot, or was that just some kind of a subterfuge that they were having there? Because that bolt like drops out of his arm at the beginning of the episode when he's showing her into the doctor's office there. So, and then he like kicks it under a cabinet or something. But then I never hear any robotic noise for the rest of the episode. So that's why I was thinking it was just a way at the beginning of getting to know her, for some reason. So I don't know. I'll be keeping my eye open for that, for whenever he moves his arm. Maybe it's just a robotic arm. So, anyways, but that guy is interesting. That guy's funny. And thought he had a couple interesting lines at the end of the Christmas episode. Okay, so now we'll move into talking about Miss Potts, or Bill. But anyways, so we got Bill Potts, and like I said, she was brought into the office there, and she sat down, and she's there waiting or whatever, and as she starts to look around more and more, suddenly the doctor gets her attention, and he comes out there, and I think the one of the interesting things here is the doctor says that what he liked about her is that when everybody else in the class, when he's giving his lecture, when everybody else in the class doesn't understand something, they frown. And he said the thing that was interesting about her is that when she doesn't understand something, she smiles. And so that's like what drew him to her. Essentially cultivating her here. He starts her out as his pupil, right? Or he's her tutor, but we all know where that's leading. I thought that this whole situation was very much like the situation with Matt Smith when he meets up with Clara. If we remember, he's back in Victorian England. He's trying to avoid anything, but Clara gets his attention that one night, and then she ends up seeking him out. But we know that Clara in that century ended up dying. But then he ends up meeting one of the other, the real Clara, not because we know that one was a splinter Clara from when she entered the Doctor's time stream at the end of that episode, at the end of that season. So we know that Victorian England Clara was a splinter Clara. So he ends up moving on and meeting the real Clara in, you know, in modern day England or whatever, and so that starts the whole thing. So, but it was this, watching this happen the way it was, with him being completely pulled away, and then this one person, this particular young lady, is now kind of breaking through the barriers and bringing him back out. So I thought there was a parallel there that I thought was interesting. But so anyways, we find out that he likes her, obviously, because when everybody else doesn't understand, they frown. But Bill Potts, she smiles, and he liked that. So he ends up taking her on as a pupil and all that. And she's very clever. She's very fun. I can tell she's going to be a lot of fun as a companion, in my opinion. But I'd also like to hear all of your guys' opinion. Please tell me what you think of her as a companion just starting out, down in the comments, please. If you're watching this video, please go ahead and go down in the comments and let me know what you think of Bill Potts, the new companion. So, I think it's also interesting the part where she follows the Doctor and the bald guy down into that, like, whatever it was, service room under the building or something, and they're down there talking, and basically the bald guy's asking the Doctor about why are you teaching her, and he's like, I'm teaching her because I'm teaching her everything. And he's like, why are you teaching her everything? And he's like, I'm teaching her everything because it rhymes, which goes back to his comment earlier when she asked him about the quantum physics lecture he was supposed to give when he came in and talked about poetry, and he said poetry and quantum physics, same thing. She's like, how's it the same thing? He's all, because of the rhymes. So anyways, but she sneaks down there and she makes a noise, and so the Doctor ends up asking, hey, how did you set the door? And the guy says, I set it to friendly only. So that's kind of funny. I mean, I thought that setting for their defense setting was funny. Friendlies only. So I thought that was, these are the little funny things that I like about Doctor Who. So, but anyway, so we move on from that. So that's when we find her meeting. That's when, Bill Potts meets, who we eventually find out her name is Heather, on that bench, and they go, and that's where we discover these puddles. Now, these puddles are pretty darn interesting. There's a couple things that they remind me of. Number one, they remind me of, if you remember the episodes with Craig, and his girl, they start out, they're not together, but those episodes with Craig with the flat that had a second story, but it wasn't actually supposed to have a second story. It had the creepy old dude upstairs that was drawing people up there, and there was and a little girl was up there, and all the various things, and they were drawing people up there because the ship was trying to take off. And if you remember, it was looking for people that didn't want to stay put. It was looking for people. It was choosing people that wanted to get away, or that were just looking to go away or go somewhere. So that was a parallel with this puddle that I noticed. That was kind of similar to what was going on with that time ship in that episode with Craig, when where the Doctor, Matt Smith, rents a room from him. So I think there may be a parallel there, but this obviously looks a little bit more technologically advanced, in my opinion, and that's what kind of maybe throws me off a little bit about it. But the fact that it was looking for that same trait kind of made me wonder, is this maybe just a more advanced that same species or that same technology that built that, but now a more advanced version? Because if you think about it, it's interesting. It seems like there is some sort of a shuttle pod or a command module or something that can actually land and drop what the Doctor kind of refers to as an oil slick of that intelligent fluid or whatever. And then that module or whatever can take off and go wherever and hide. And all these puddles end up being like monitoring stations, and I don't know, possibly even some kind of, like, I guess maybe they're like somehow connected databases or something. And maybe all they did was just envelop that girl and then made her made her knowledge and her like experience part of their own. But there might have been something, there was also something else that other thing they needed from her, and that was her desire to go and to get away. So almost as if maybe they overcame that problem they had, that even they didn't just need a person that wanted to go somewhere, they needed the right kind of person, and humans weren't really fit for the task. And it almost seems like as if they've overcome, maybe those people that did that technology have maybe with this new technology overcome that problem and are able to find people and just assimilate them into a form that they can be used. So I don't know, it's just a theory at this point, because hey, it's just the first episode of the season. But that's just one of my thoughts, just as it occurred to me looking at the way that they described the puddle in this episode. So I also thought it was funny that the doctor was so incredulous of her when he asked her, what do you think's going on? And she said, oh, I was on Netflix, I saw a thing where lizards got in and took over people's brains. And he's like I can't believe you. I'm going to have to up my game. I can't believe you just suggested lizards taking over people's brains. And my first thought was, wait a second. Didn't you just have brains taking over people's brains in the last episode, Doctor? But I was just like, whatever. I mean, wasn't that a little strange? We're good with that, though, right? Okay, so that's not too far out. But lizards? No, that's just beyond. No, I'm just kidding. Anyway, I thought that was funny. It just occurred to me as I was watching it. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out about the puddles that was interesting is the fact that they seemed that they weren't just in one place. Because the Doctor ran all the way to the end of time, and there was one of those puddles there where he landed the TARDIS. There was one of those puddles there that almost got Billy or Bill. I mean, and then he goes to the Dalek homeworld. I mean, he goes to the Dalek homeworld thinking, okay, yeah, that's what he meant by the hottest fire in the universe. He figures he'll dodge the Daleks a bit, and the Daleks will end up taking care of, whatever it is, right? But I'll get to the interesting bit about that in a second. But so I mean, but it's interesting how these puddles are everywhere. They weren't just, I mean, you got to imagine this command module or whatever it is, because there was scorch marks on the ground by the puddle, remember. So there is some kind of physical module, has to be some kind of physical module that is like the relay center for all these puddles or whatever. But we got to imagine it's also time travel capable, whatever it is. So that may suggest Missy Master. So, or possibly somebody else with time travel. There have been other races that weren't Time Lords in the past in Doctor Who that had the ability to time travel and stuff like that. It is also very possible that these puddles and everything and the scorch marks that he saw there connected to me and Clara, who are in their own TARDIS now, doing whatever, running around on their own, and the Doctor essentially kind of doesn't really know about it. Or he does know about it, and he's, playing dumb. He does that sometimes. So, anyway, so that's also another possibility of what's happening there. So, anyways, the other thing about these puddles, the reason why I say that I go along with the Doctor when he suggested that they were like technological, like some kind of technologically advanced engine oil or whatever he called it. I think that may be right, because when you think about the properties of the puddle, when they look into it to get their reflections, they don't get a reflection. That's okay. Now the interesting thing about that, and I think I know where Stephen Moffat got this idea, because as a YouTuber and working with a camera and seeing how awkward it is when I'm used to, it doesn't work like when you're looking into a mirror in the house or or wherever you're at, in your bathroom and wherever. It doesn't look that way. When it looks exactly the opposite of the way a mirror would look. So that's, I think, almost where I may be thinking where that's where Moffat got this idea. But so this pool is not actually a reflective surface. It's just a puddle of technology, some kind of nanobots or whatever, and it's basically scanning who's looking into it and basically using some kind of cloaking technology or whatever, and showing them a surface that looks like their reflection, but it's actually a video image, right? That would explain why they're not seeing their reflection. They're seeing video image recorded by the surveillance of the puddle, and then that surveillance image is then being put over the top of the puddle, the surface of the puddle, to look like their reflection. But the reason why it's not a reflection is because it's actually a video image. So that's my piece of reasoning regarding the puddle and why I think they are technologically advanced, pieces of equipment essentially. Now the other trippy thing about this is, number one is what did everybody think about when she was appearing to Bill? When Heather was appearing to Bill after she'd been into the puddle and she was like dripping with the water and the way her hair looked. Did anybody else get like that creepy feeling that you got when you were watching the Ring movies? Dude, I totally did. Watching that water dripping and all that stuff like it did. And the way she like jerked at her quickly a couple times, and the way she grabbed her face when they were on that strange planet 23 billion years in the future or whatever it was. I mean, there was just some moments there where she looked like and kind of even acted like, and gave me that feeling, that creepy feeling that I got from the chick in the Ring that used to crawl out of the TV. I don't know, but I was just wondering if anybody else kind of experienced that at all. So let me know in comments if you did. So then, like I said, it goes on to they can't get away from it. They run, like I said, to the end of time pretty much, and there's another puddle right there waiting for them, and which adds to my theory about me and Clara maybe possibly being behind it with their time machine. But then they run, so the Doctor gets the bright idea of he's going to run to the planet of the Daleks, and that's how he's going to handle this. He's going to, the Daleks will take care of her, Heather, or whatever it is, or the puddle. So they run there, and his plan is to dodge the Daleks for a little while and allow the puddle thing to have a showdown with the Daleks, and the Daleks will win, and then they just sneak back to the TARDIS and get away. I'm sure that's the plan. But it didn't work out that way, because how interesting is this puddle? Because it just accepted shots from a Dalek, the laser bolts of a Dalek, like if it was like mosquitoes buzzing around its head. I mean, it was like nothing, and all it was doing was learning from the Dalek, and essentially by absorbing and analyzing what was being fired at it, was able to go figure out how to kill the Dalek. Now, I don't know if it somehow turned itself into a Dalek and killed the Dalek, or if it just turned into, thrust itself at the Dalek as water and seeped in through the Dalek's casing and got in and took over the Dalek itself. I'm thinking that may be what happened, just because of the way we saw the water dripping out of the Dalek later. But then again, the whole Dalek disappears when it turns back into Heather. The whole Dalek disappears. So it's hard to say. Like I said, don't know if Heather killed the other Dalek and just became a Dalek and killed the other Dalek, or if she took over the other Dalek. But either way. So even the Daleks couldn't stop it. And all it did was all it does is assimilate and learn. That's and it's impervious. I mean, like I said, when the Dalek laser bolts don't even affect it, and all it did was assimilate and learn from it. That's a pretty scary ability that puddle has. That's pretty amazing. So anyway, this is an interesting episode, obviously written by Mr. Moffat. And yeah, these puddles are going to be interesting, and I'm sure they're part of the story arc for the season. I'm sure these puddles and Heather are going to be back. Maybe not right away, and maybe not even until the end of the season. Maybe the final episode or one of the final couple episodes of the season. But I definitely see this being a big part of this season's story arc. And then after the whole thing kind of is done, the Doctor's like, okay, let's go. And Bill actually has some tears in her eyes, and Nordal, the bald guy, Nordal, he actually comes up to her and says, yeah, that's the Doctor for you. He never notices the tears. And I'm not so sure. I think some doctors actually do notice the tears. I think David Tennant and Matt Smith were definitely two doctors that were kind of a little bit of a break from the norm as far as the Doctor goes, and they did care about the tears. But I would agree that Christopher Eccleston, the War Doctor, and a lot of the older Doctors, and this Doctor Capaldi, are probably less inclined to notice the tears. Not because they don't care, it's more because they're busy and they don't notice. And it may be partly because they don't want to deal with it. But, you know, and we know the Doctor's personality. We know he's like that. He's he's just unique in that way. The final thing I wanted to point out was that in the final segments there, he chooses not to take her memory. Once again, in my opinion, paralleling Matt Smith and Clara, because if you remember, there was he had the Centauran. He had Strax there, and he had the memory worm, and the memory worm kept getting Strax, and then they ended up not getting Clara, and then he ended up deciding he didn't want to erase Clara's memory either. So, like I said, more parallels here between Bill and Clara. And I'm not sure I don't know if they meant to do that on purpose, or if that's just like, if it just happened because that's the way the storytelling went. But it's an interesting parallel, to say the least, because they show the Doctor trying to be more xenophobic. He's really actually trying to pull away more and put himself more into solitude, which leads me to believe they're really trying to prepare at this point to take the Doctor to a place where he gets more like the Valeyard. And if you don't know what the Valeyard is, ask me in comments, and I'll explain more about the Valeyard. So anyways, that's about it for this episode. I think I think that the season's looking good. I do like the new companion. I've liked Capaldi. I know that some of the newer viewers to Doctor Who don't like Capaldi. I get that. He's not their cup of tea, but for those of us who have watched all of Doctor Who and we're used to the Doctor a certain way, we see Capaldi as kind of going back to that old style of the Doctor, where he was more of a Hart. Capaldi's more throwing back to Hartnell, the very, very first Doctor, the older, grumpier, just I don't got time for this stuff kind of Doctor. So those of us that have watched all of the old Who and stuff like that, we appreciate him. But I can understand why the younger generation that have just gotten interested recently with the newer Doctors, like Matt Smith and David Tennant, would find Capaldi a little bit not to their taste. So anyways, that's it for this Doctor Who video about the season premiere of Doctor Who, the pilot. I will be doing another video pretty soon here about the spin-off show that they're doing, Class. Have it recorded, and so very soon I will go ahead and do a video about that, in case anybody's interested in what I think about that as well. So if you haven't already, please hit subscribe, and we'll see you guys next week.